What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here. In today's video, I wanted to show you my favorite Warlock build for Season of the Splicer, and probably the build that I will be using the most in Grandmasters this season. The footage you are seeing right now is from the Day 1 Challenge Mode raid. This build allowed me to hold down a plate solo during the Gatekeeper encounter. I even took out 2 Overload Minotaurs back to back while contest mode is active, and as you can see from the wipe screen, I had the most kills on the fire team. This footage is not in here to throw my fire team under the bus. Far from it. I love playing with these guys on day 1, and I look forward to the next day 1 raid. No, the reason this is here is to show the insane power of this build in the hardest content in the game. The next hardest content would definitely be Grandmaster Nightfalls. So in this video, I am going to first break down the armor side of this Warlock build and all the mods and synergy that are going on with it, and then after that, just give some good weapon loadout suggestions to take into the GMs this season. I'm very excited for GMs to be back and can't wait to use this build. So let us jump into it. First off, we are on Top Tree Voidwalker, the Attunement of Chaos. We are running Vortex Grenades and pairing them with the exotic Controverse Holds. On the helmet, we are running Wrath of Rasputin, which allows us to create Warmind cells with solar splash damage. And then I am running Ashes to Assets, which gives us more super energy for grenade final blows, and then a grenade launcher ammo finder. I do not know if these stack, but you could even run double grenade launcher ammo finder. If you know whether these stack or not, please leave a comment below and let me know. I also have a Discipline mod on, as this build is based around spamming your grenades, so I'd recommend Discipline mods to get you up to 100 Discipline so you have very high uptime on your grenades. Next, we have the Exotic Gauntlets Controverse Hold. I'm running Warmind's Protection, which just allows us to take less damage from enemies that are near Warmind cells. Another great Void Warmind cell mod is Cellular Suppression, which suppresses enemies similarly to Blinding Grenades. This is very strong in Grandmaster Nightfalls, but the choice is yours what you want to run. It also depends how much energy you have available on your armor, depending on your other mods. Warmind's Protection only costs 2 energy, where Cellular Suppression is 4. For the weapon modifiers on gloves, it really just depends which Grandmaster you're running and what the champion types are. So that will dictate whether you're running Anti-Barrier or Overload or Unstoppable. And depending what you need, you can slap on another mod. On Warlocks, Recovery is great to reduce your Rift cooldown. Next up we have the robes. Here I am running Warmind's Decree, which states that Void Splash Damage final blows have a chance to create Warmind cells. This is actually insanely strong. It works with Deathbringer, Void Rocket Launchers in general, Void Grenade Launchers, and your Vortex Grenades and Nova Bombs. So you'll be creating Warmind cells like crazy with this build. I then have Damage Resistance mods, but you could also run Reserve mods depending on the activity. The good thing about having Warmind's Decree on your robes is you can keep your whole build together and just swap out robes depending on the damage type for that activity. So if there is a lot of arc damage, you just swap your Void robes to arc robes, then throw on arc damage resistance, and then you can still run Warmind's Decree because it is from the artifact and can be put on any type of armor regardless of elemental affinity or armor slot. One mod I highly recommend for all GMs though is Concussive Dampener. It just helps so much with survivability. Next we have our boots. I have 2 grenade launcher scavenger mods on from the artifact because it lowers the cost of them from 3 to 1. This allows us to throw on Rage of the Warmind, which costs 5 energy and adds solar damage to the explosions of Warmind cells that we destroy. This is huge as it makes our cells do more damage, but the bigger benefit comes from pairing it with Wrath of Rasputin, which allows us to chain Warmind cells by exploding our Warmind cells. So the ad clear from these cells is insane. Even in Grandmasters, they will take out all the red bars nearby. And to make our Warmind cells take out ads that are not so nearby, we put Global Reach on our bond. This increases the area of effect of our Warmind cells. And lastly, we have the strongest artifact mod of the season, the mod that has made grenade launchers extremely powerful in PvE, Breach and Clear. This debuffs enemies by 30% for roughly 10 seconds, so it is effectively Tether or Hammer Strike or Tractor Cannon, but on your grenade launcher. However, it only works on bosses and champions, but that is where you want it the most anyways. It makes melting champions much quicker and easier, and allows you to output way more damage on bosses. This pairs incredibly well with things like Witherhoard or Anarchy, as they not only debuff the enemy, but they also do damage over time, allowing you to swap to another weapon to deal damage with. The Warmind cell generation of this build is incredible. In the day 1 raid, I essentially had 5 ways to make Warmind cells. My Truth Teller Void GL, Nova Bomb, and Vortex Grenades all could make Warmind cells because of Warmind's Decree, and then 7th Seraph Officer Revolver can obviously make them because it is a 7th Seraph weapon, and Anarchy can also make them if you stick an enemy with Anarchy and then swap to 7th Seraph and have it out when the enemy dies. This combo also works very nicely with Wither Horde and Ikelos SMG. And now that I think about it, you could throw in a 6-way, which is Rage of the Warmind proccing Wrath of Rasputin to have solar splash damage create a Warmind cell. You don't need to use the Warmind cell mods I use either. You could just run Warmind's Decree with a 7 Seraph weapon and this subclass and still make a ton of Warmind cells and use them how you like. Whether you like Power of Rasputin or Cellular Suppression or whatever. This was just my preferred playstyle with the build and the things that I will be using when Grandmasters launch next week. Depending on the Grandmaster, you may not have unstoppable champions, so you cannot take advantage of unstoppable GL. But, as usual, it will still be worth it to run Anarchy with Breach and Clear for the damage over time and the debuff it provides. Depending how you play GMs, you may need to run double primaries, so for instance, an Overload Hand Cannon and an Anti-Barrier Scout. But if you have a team you really trust, then you could have one dedicated Anti-Barrier player and 2 Overload players. This would allow you to run a grenade launcher as a secondary weapon as well. This strategy is certainly more risky because if your one anti-barrier player goes down, then you are helpless to anti-barrier champions. However, if you are a highly skilled team trying to run the GMs quickly, then I would recommend doing this. But if you are just trying to get a completion for the Conqueror seal, then everyone should have a loadout that can deal with all the champions in the Nightfall. The next part of this video will be me going over the weapons that I will be taking into the Grandmasters this season.
So first I want to go over the artifact mods and just go over the weapon archetypes that we can use in Grandmasters this season. So we have Anti-Barrier Auto Rifle, Overload Hand Cannon, Unstoppable Sidearm, Anti-Barrier Scout Rifle, Overload SMG, and Unstoppable Grenade Launcher. Right away, I'm probably not going to use Unstoppable Sidearm because, as stated earlier, Unstoppable Grenade Launchers are just so good this year with Breach and Clear. You can if you like, but I'm not really going to be going over any sidearm weapons. And next up, Overload SMG is just not nearly as consistent as Overload Hand Cannon. The one exception you could maybe make for this would be the 7 Seraph SMG or Ikelos SMG, just because they can spawn Warmind cells, they're super strong. But I definitely prefer hand cannons for overloading. And then between Anti-Barrier Auto and Anti-Barrier Scout, I definitely prefer Anti-Barrier Scout. So with that out of the way, let's get into some weapons that I will be using. First is this 7 Seraph Officer Revolver. Mine has time payload. Because there's a short delay, the game seems to register it as 2 shots. So you only need 2 shots instead of 4 to stun an overload champion. This is very, very strong, and I highly recommend using something with time payload, or explosive payload is also good, which I have on this Firefly, but I have found it to be a little more inconsistent than time payload. So even though I love Fatebringer, my go-to is probably going to be the 7 Seraph Officer Revolver for anything overload. Additionally, Divinity, as usual, is always good for overloads, but that just depends on how your team wants to run. Next up, Anti-Barrier Scout. I have 1 Scout in each element that I really like. I've got this Eternal Blazon, Rapid Hit 1 for All, which is a god roll in my opinion for Grandmasters. I also have this Pleiades Corrector with Demolitionist, which again, with this build being based all around grenades, is very good. And then a Royal Chase for Void. Not the best roll for Grandmasters, but it gives me a Void option. Additionally, Hung Jury, I was able to get Rapid Hit 1 for All, which I very much enjoy. This gun actually feels great. I'm very happy with it. Night Watch was my old go-to and is still a very good option for the kinetic slot. A lot of people really like Ignition Code this season, and for good reason. I was lucky to get an absolute god roll. I've got Spike Grenades with Vorpal, so it can output good damage. Ambitious Assassin, so when I get kills, I can overload my magazine and have 2 grenades to shoot, as well as Blinding Grenades, which are just wonderful for Grandmaster activities, and a Reload Speed Masterwork, so that is definitely something I will probably be using. Succession, the Reconstruction Vorpal God roll with Tactical Mag, it's just a wonderful roll. Again, this depends on your team loadout because there is no artifact. Like last season we had Anti-Barrier Sniper, there is none of that, but depending on your team composition, this could also be good as usual. Wither Horde, especially with Unstoppable GL, but even just to activate Breach and Clear, is a very strong option. And lastly, the 7 Seraph Carbine. That's probably the only auto rifle I would really take in. It's got decent range, especially my roll, and it can make Warmind cells. Ariana's Vow is one of my favorite weapons in the game. I love anything with auto-loading holster, as you'll probably be able to see shortly. But with intrinsically having anti-barrier shots, this weapon is always a good option. However, it doesn't allow you to take advantage of Wither Horde or Anarchy. But again, depending on team composition, that may not matter. Really, if you have a well-oiled machine of a team, you can just run one Anarchy with Breach and Clear, and then kind of just go with whatever you want, because you're going to be debuffing the champions, and then just have something good at breaking the anti-barriers. For grenade launchers, again, they're so good this season. So Salvage Salvo for Arc. I've got an empty vessel with auto-loading in Solar. I've got spike grenades, so that's lucky. And then I've got a Truth Teller. This one has spike and procs grenades. I do have a blinding grenade one that I think I got auto-loading on, but I will probably just stick with this one. I've used it a ton. I really like it. And then just some generally good weapons to use in the heavy slot. These are all good. Outrageous Fortune and Berenger's Memory, if you have Warmind's Decree, can make Warmind cells. This is an arc option. I probably won't use it, but I just wanted to show one in every element just because grenade launchers are so good this season. Xenophage is just all around always a good weapon. With Wrath of Rasputin, it can make Warmind cells. So again, depending on team composition, that's a good option. A really good rocket launcher can be really good for burst DPS. Deathbringer is amazing this season. As well, rocket launchers can make Warmind cells. If it's Solar, Wrath of Rasputin will proc it, and Void ones can this season because of Warmind's Decree. Sleeper Simulant, when it gets a buff, may be a, no pun intended, but a sleeper pick for GMs, depending on how much damage it does. I have done testing, and it does not make Warmind cells, sadly. That's pretty much it for the loadouts. So I hope this helped give you some insight into what will be good to use in the GMs this season.
So that is pretty much it for the video. My passion is build crafting in Destiny, and I have a ton of amazing builds in all areas of the game that I would like to showcase. So if you're interested in seeing that, consider subscribing, as it really helps the channel. I have a ton of great builds to show off in the future, and your support for the channel will help me reach more eyes so I can help more people make strong, effective builds. If you thought this build was great and want to try it in the future, let me know down in the comments below. Or let me know what your favorite Grandmaster build is this season. This is definitely mine, and as a result, I will be on my Warlock a ton. And if you thought this video was good and helpful, then a like would be greatly appreciated. The channel has seen some decent growth lately, and I just want to thank every one of you who has watched my content and helped the channel grow. I appreciate it so much. I hope this video helped you and that you try out this build and see just how strong it can be. But that's it from me. Take care, Guardians.